Hello again. Now, ageism is becoming a growing global challenge. A United Nations and World Health Organization report suggests ageism can lead to poorer health, earlier deaths, and is costing economies billions. Now, the report has also found the COVID-19 pandemic had a devastating toll on the elderly. Well, let's find out more now. We chat to the CEO of Auria Senior Living, Barry Kaganson. Barry, good morning and thanks so much for your time. And like we said, just giving an idea of what this latest report saying, the second person in the world is believed to hold ageist attitudes. What exactly is an ageist attitude and what are these beliefs?
Exactly right, and good morning. Thanks for having me on the show. I think it's important just to discuss what ageism is and what's really being referred to in this report. So ageism is defined is discrimination when age is used to categorize and divide people in a way that leads to harm or disadvantage or injustice. And of course, this prejudice or this way of viewing older people differently has been exacerbated by COVID-19, where older people are seen, especially in this time, to be more uniformly frail and vulnerable compared to younger people who are seen to be more, perhaps the words one can use are invincible or reckless, with this type of youthful hubris that young people, traditionally have. And that's really the discrepancy and the prejudice that arises. One must bear in mind that according to latest or recent UN reports, 1 in 10 people in the world is currently over 60. Now that is anticipated to double to effectively 1 in 5 people who will be over the age of 60 by the year 2050. Now that's only 30 years from now. And 30 years actually goes by kind of in the blink of an eye. Yeah. If one thinks 30 years ago was 1991, it doesn't seem like such a long time ago. So there's going to be a significantly larger proportion of older people in the coming decades. And the issue really, one of the issues that's highlighted by this report is that people over the age of 60 in society often tend to become invisible. And what I mean by that is that a lot of countries focus on the needs of the younger members of population and of the population, that would be in terms of healthcare, of education, of training, of employment, but they tend to marginalize or sideline the older members of society. And why I was kind of getting into this changing demographic is that these people are very much, this cohort of people are very much part of the global future. And it's important that they are actually brought into society in a way that benefits them and benefits society as a whole.
Absolutely, because they have knowledge and experience, I suppose, that we need to draw on, especially in the time that we're having over the past year or so. So when we're talking about these ageist attitudes, Barry, are we talking about how they are treated by their own families, whether they are left and forgotten and sent away, basically to not be, the sort of the task of taking care of them becomes a bother, as some people see it, or are we looking at generally how we see younger people, how they regard older people in society?
I think it's everything that you just said. So discrimination really is, when it comes to older people, discrimination really kind of falls into a couple of categories, and that's discrimination in the workplace, discrimination in the health and social care environment, discrimination also in media, and discrimination in the legal system. But if I can just talk a bit about possibly the economic aspect of this discrimination. So there was an interesting statistic that I read where when one looks at retirement ages and that type of thing, that in Australia, a study showed that if only 5% of the population over the age of 55, an additional 5% of the population over 55 were to be employed, that would have a positive impact of $48 billion annually to the Australian economy. And Australia is just an example. Now, just to put that into perspective, 5% of that population, of that age group, is only 250 people. 250,000 people. Now you consider that, for example, the New Year's Eve Sydney fireworks attracts 1 million people. 250,000 people is not a lot of people to put back into the employment market. So that's one of the economic impacts of this ageist attitude of trying to get older people to retire earlier or to be replacing them in the workplace with younger people, etc., etc.
So how do we fare here?
As you said,
Sorry, Barry, how do we fare here in South Africa in terms of our treatment of the elderly? Because we know in some countries the elderly are revered. We look at a lot of Asian countries also, and, we see them living longer as well, over 100 years in most of these countries. But you would imagine that's because of lifestyle and how they're treated as well. In South Africa, how do we fare? Are we just totally bad at it? Are we just very ageist?
I think we're probably in line with the rest of the world. I think COVID has also had a negative impact. I mean, of course, everyone knows what's happened to the South African economy due to COVID and before. And I think a lot of companies that are looking to downscale, of course, that exercise has a very negative impact on the older people because they're looking at early retirement, et cetera, et cetera. The other point you raised earlier was that the family attitude. Sometimes that one of the major causes of ageism is that fear of death and disability. And often the coping mechanism for people is really to segregate older people, and because that kind of gets them to avoid thinking about their own mortality. So often older people, there's this perception, which is obviously rapidly changing, but some years ago that older people should be sort of stuck away in old age homes, which is obviously something that is most detrimental to a number of aspects of society. So that type of thing needs to change. The other one is, as I said, is in the media. Often we're faced with media images, and it's been very topical at the moment, the way that women are portrayed in the media. When I say at the moment, for the last decade or so, but also the way older people are portrayed in the media. And why I say that is the lack of older people, for example, in advertising. So just another interesting point is that about 25% of hotel room nights, leisure hotel room nights, are sold to those over 65. Now, if that's globally. Now, if you look at advertising for holidays, etc., you very seldom see a face of an older person, even though they are a significant portion of the market. So, for example, one looking at the adverts for cruises on the Amalfi Coast of Italy, for example, you'll very seldom see older people in those adverts. So that's also something where there's this sort of bias within the media to older people.
Well, very